The Forgotten Makers. The galaxy was dying and no one knew how to stop it. Across 1,000 star systems, worlds once bright with life now fell silent. The swarm did not negotiate. It did not pause. It consumed everything: metal, flesh, data, atmosphere, and left behind only gray dust and the hollow screams of civilizations that had existed for millennia. The biomechanical plague moved like a living shadow, adaptive and insatiable, turning thriving colonies into graveyards in mere rotations. The Galactic Accord had tried everything. Fleets numbering in the tens of thousands engaged the swarm at the borders of the outer rim. Quantum weapons that could crack moons barely slowed its advance. Biological countermeasures were absorbed and turned against their creators within hours. Every strategy, every sacrifice bought only days before another system blinked out of existence. Panic spread faster than the swarm itself. Refugee ships clogged hyperlanes. Governments collapsed. Ancient rivalries flared as species pointed claws and appendages at one another, seeking someone to blame for the apocalypse none could stop. The Accord's grand chamber, once a symbol of unity among the stars, now echoed with desperation and rage. It was in this chaos that Bren made his discovery. The Tashari scholar had spent his entire life in the archives of Velcora, a moon-sized library orbiting a dying red giant. While warships burned and worlds fell, Bren remained among the ancient records, searching for patterns in history that might offer hope. He was a creature of thin gray fur and large, knowing eyes, a species built for memory and contemplation, not war. The data fragment he found was old. Impossibly old, predating the Accord itself by thousands of cycles. It had been filed incorrectly, buried beneath layers of corrupted indexes and forgotten dialects. At first, Bren thought it was another myth, another superstitious tale from the primitive ages. But the more he read, the more the patterns aligned. The Makers. Every spacefaring civilization had stories of them. The beings who had appeared in the ancient past, who had given knowledge to the primitive, who had seeded the stars with wisdom and then vanished without explanation. Some called them gods. Others called them benefactors. The scientific consensus had long dismissed them as cultural fiction, a shared delusion born from the need to explain rapid technological leaps that were, in truth, simply coincidental. But Bren's fragment told a different story. It spoke of a species, not gods but flesh and blood, beings called humans who had walked on 2 legs, who had possessed only 2 eyes and no natural weapons, yet had mastered technologies that made the current Accord look primitive. The fragment described them as curious beyond reason, dangerous beyond measure, and compassionate in ways the galaxy had forgotten, and it spoke of why they left. The humans had fought a war, not with others but with themselves, a war so terrible that it nearly ended their species, a conflict that scarred their homeworld and taught them the true cost of unchecked ambition. In the aftermath, they had made a choice. They sealed themselves away beyond the Silent Zone, a region of space where no signals penetrated, where no ship returned, and withdrew from galactic affairs entirely. They had not died. They had simply stopped answering. Bren's hands trembled as he traced the coordinates embedded in the fragment: the Silent Zone, the forbidden expanse that every navigator avoided, where spatial anomalies and gravitational distortions made travel suicidal. For 10,000 cycles it had been marked as impassable, a natural barrier, a graveyard of lost expeditions. But what if it was not natural? What if it was a wall they had built? Bren brought his findings to the Accord Council. He expected skepticism. He expected dismissal. Instead, he found desperation. When extinction looms, even myths become strategies. The council voted. A single ship would be sent. Not a warship. The humans, if they existed, would not respond to threats. A diplomatic vessel, small and unarmed, carrying only a message and a plea. The crew would be volunteers, knowing they might never return. And leading them would be Ambassador Trell, a Kitharan diplomat whose forearms had signed more peace treaties than any living being. Trell was old, even by Kitharan standards. Her carapace bore the scars of a dozen conflicts, and her compound eyes had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. She did not believe in the Makers, but she believed in trying. Bren insisted on joining the mission. The council allowed it, perhaps because they respected his discovery, perhaps because they assumed none of them would survive anyway. The ship was named Echoes of Hope, which struck Bren as either deeply poetic or bitterly ironic. They launched under the hollow gaze of a billion desperate eyes. Behind them, the swarm continued its advance. Ahead of them lay the silent zone, a dark expanse where stars flickered and died, where the laws of physics bent in ways that defied understanding. As they crossed the threshold, every sensor went dark. Every signal turned to static. The ship drifted in a void that felt less like space and more like erasure. Hours passed in absolute silence. Then days, Trell began composing their final messages. Bren prayed to gods he did not believe in, and then without warning the void answered. A light appeared. Not a star. Not a ship. Something else. A structure. Vast beyond comprehension. Geometric and elegant. Humming with power that made their instruments scream. It hung in the darkness like a sleeping titan, and as echoes of hope drifted closer, panels across its surface began to illuminate. A voice filled their ship. It was not transmitted through their comms. It simply was, resonating in the walls, in the air, in their very bones. You should not have come here. The voice was calm, almost gentle. But beneath it lay something ancient and unfathomable, a weight of ages that pressed against their minds. Trell found her voice, though it cracked. We come seeking the Makers. We come seeking humanity, silence, then impossibly, something like sadness in the response. That name has not been spoken in this place for a very long time. Bren stepped forward, data fragment clutched in his shaking hands. The galaxy is dying. We have nowhere else to turn. If you are the ones who gave us the stars, and please, we are your children, and we are dying, the silence stretched. Outside, the massive structure pulsed with light. Then the voice spoke again, and this time there was something else in it. Recognition, memory, and perhaps regret. Show us. The silent watchers, they did not board echoes of hope. Instead, the ship was invited. Trell could find no better word for it. The structure opened, not with doors but with the simple absence of walls, and their vessel drifted into a space that defied geometry. The interior seemed both impossibly vast and intimately small, as though distance itself had become optional. Bren's instruments had stopped trying to make sense of what they detected. Gravity existed where it was needed. Light appeared without source, and throughout the space, shapes moved. Constructs of metal and energy, elegant and purposeful, attending to tasks beyond comprehension. Trell kept her forearms carefully neutral, the Catharan gesture for peaceful intent. Beside her, Bren recorded everything, though he suspected no one would ever believe the data. The voice returned, and this time it had direction. They turned toward a platform that had not been there a moment before, and standing upon it were three figures. Human. The word whispered through Bren's mind like recognition of something he had never seen but always known. They stood on two legs, just as the ancient texts described. Bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, faces arranged with two eyes, one nose, one mouth, fragile looking. Compared to the armored Kitharans or the dense musculature of Threxian warriors. No natural weapons, no obvious adaptations for survival, and yet there was something in the way they held themselves. A stillness that spoke of perfect control, an awareness in their eyes that suggested they saw not just Trell and Bren, but every system, every possibility, every outcome of this moment simultaneously. These were not the primitive creatures who had once gifted fire to the dark. These were something that had evolved far beyond. The center figure stepped forward. Female, by the gender markers Bren recognized from his research, dark skin, close-cropped hair, wearing a simple uniform of deep blue that seemed to absorb light. Her eyes were brown, warm, and infinitely sad. "I am Amara Chen," she said, and her voice matched the one that had filled their ship. But now it carried breath, humanity, life. "I speak for the stewards. Welcome to Bastion Station, the last threshold of humanity." Trell performed the bow of greeting, all four arms extended. "I am Ambassador Trell of the Galactic Accord. This is Scholar Bren of Velcora. We come in desperation and hope." "We know," Amara said quietly. "We have been watching." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Bren could not help himself. "Watching? You've been watching while the galaxy burns?" One of the other humans, a male with gray-streaked hair and East Asian features, spoke. His nameplate identified him as Dr. James Park. We do not intervene lightly, scholar. We learned that lesson in blood long ago. Then why respond now? Trell asked, her voice carefully controlled. Why break your silence after 10,000 cycles? Amara's expression softened into something that might have been grief. Because you called us what we have not been called in millennia. You called us makers. You claimed kinship. And that... She paused, choosing words with visible care. That obligates us to at least listen. She gestured and the space around them transformed. The walls became windows. Or perhaps the windows had always been there and only now allowed sight. The vista that appeared stole the breath from Trell's respiratory spiracles. Space. But not empty space. A region of star systems enclosed in a lattice of light. Geometric patterns of energy connecting worlds in a web of incomprehensible complexity. Planets that gleamed with cities of crystalline towers. Orbital constructs that dwarfed any megastructure the Accord had ever built. And ships, thousands of them, moving in perfect coordination, each one radiating power signatures that made Accord dreadnoughts look like children's toys. This is what we became, Amara said, her voice heavy with complex emotion. After our war, after we nearly destroyed ourselves, we chose to grow inward rather than outward, to perfect rather than expand, and to never again unleash our worst impulses on an unsuspecting galaxy. Bren stared, his scholar's mind racing. The uplifting. The gifts of technology. That was you. You were teaching us, man, we were atoning, Dr. Park corrected, for what we almost became. We gave you the tools to reach the stars, hoping you would use them better than we did. His face darkened, and then we watched you repeat our mistakes. Wars, genocides, ecological collapse, all the same patterns, so you abandoned us? Trell's carapace flushed with the Kitharan color of anger. You gave us the means to destroy ourselves and then watched from behind your wall? Yes, Amara said simply. The honesty of it was more cutting than any defense, because intervening further would have made you dependent. We had to let you grow, or fail, and now we're failing, Bren said quietly. The swarm will end everything we've built. The third human, until now silent, finally spoke. She was younger than the others, with dark hair tied back and eyes that burned with suppressed intensity. Her nameplate read Captain Skylar Rodriguez. Tell us about the swarm, everything. They did. Trell displayed tactical data, the cascade of fallen systems, the failed countermeasures. Bren provided his analysis of the swarm's adaptive behavior, its terrible intelligence. And throughout, the humans listened with an intensity that was almost physical, their eyes tracking every detail, their minds, Bren could sense it somehow, processing at speeds that made his own thoughts feel sluggish. When they finished, silence fell like a weight. Amara closed her eyes. We know what this is, she said finally. We've seen it before. Before? Trell's voice sharpened. You've encountered the swarm? Not this swarm, Dr. Park said, but its kind. 1,000,000 years ago, another galaxy faced extinction from a similar plague. We detected the signals. By the time we understood what we were seeing, that galaxy was gone, consumed entirely. Bren felt cold spread through his body. Then, there's no hope. We didn't say that, Captain Rodriguez said, and for the first time something like a smile crossed her features. It was not warm. We said we've seen it before, which means we've studied it, and we've prepared. Amara opened her eyes, and now they held a determination that seemed to push back against the darkness itself. The swarm is not biological. It's not mechanical. It's a weapon, created by a civilization that destroyed itself, trying to win a war that no longer matters. It's been spreading, dormant, and awakening for eons. Can it be stopped? Trell asked and heard the desperate hope in her own voice. Everything can be stopped, Dr. Park said, given sufficient force and sufficient will. Amara walked to the window wall, her back to them, gazing out at the protected space of humanity's sanctuary. You asked why we respond now. The truth is, we've been debating this since the moment the swarm entered Accord space. Our isolation was meant to be permanent, a shield for the galaxy as much as for ourselves. She turned and her eyes held ancient pain. We are dangerous, Ambassador. More dangerous than the swarm if we choose to be. Our restraint is the only thing that keeps the galaxy safe from us. But we are also compassionate, Captain Rodriguez added. And you were right, Scholar Bren, we did give you the stars. That makes you... She hesitated, then smiled sadly. That makes you family, and we do not abandon family. Bren felt tears forming in his eyes. You'll help us? You'll fight? Amara nodded slowly. We will do more than fight. We will end this. But understand, when humanity returns to the galaxy, it will change everything. We are not the myths you remember. We are not saviors. We are simply what became necessary. She raised her hand and the station came alive around them. Systems that had slept for millennia ignited. The lattice of light connecting the human worlds began to pulse with purposeful rhythm. And beyond the protective barrier of the silent zone, sensors that had watched in secret for 10,000 years began to transmit targeting data. "Recall your fleets," Amara said, her voice now carrying command that resonated through the station itself. "Tell the Accord to pull back to defensive positions around core worlds. Give us 72 hours. 72 hours? Trell's voice cracked. Systems are falling every day. Then we will be there in 71, Captain Rodriguez said calmly. We don't move fleets the way you do. And when we arrive, her smile turned sharp. The swarm will learn why humanity chose to leave the galaxy, and why that was mercy, to be continued. End of part 2.